From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Charisma Sandoval. Cronkite News is dedicated to covering the borderlands of Arizona. Tonight, I'll look at some of our top coverage on cross-border relations, immigration policy, and the intersection of different cultures in our state.
Data obtained by two national housing federal agencies shows that housing discrimination complaints have gone up in the last 5 years.
Cronkite News reporter Alexis Avila sat down with one Valley family who alleges they've lost their beloved home because of discrimination.
The Brown family is still living in a shelter as they try to figure out what their next step is going to be. And they are not alone. Across the country, numbers are showing that race is the second most common reason for housing discrimination.
We are currently homeless. We reside in a shelter.
Eric Brown and his wife Constance Salas say the reason they're living in a Phoenix shelter with their children is because they were victims of housing discrimination.
When we got the keys, it was time to move in, we opened it up, the house was a mess. It was feces all over the house. It was urine. It's a heavy smell of urine.
Despite the initial challenges, the Browns say they fell in love with the Goodyear home. However, the neighbors next door quickly told them their landlord, along with another neighbor from down the street, were working together to get them out.
Because he felt like he could not sell his home because a black family lived on the corner of his street next door to him.
The Browns say the landlord tried different tactics to get them out of the house, like overcharging them for small repairs.
The fees were absorbing it. You know, like it was weeds in the yard. We got a $50 HOA fee. Fadi charged us $200. And then he charged us $600. You know, for little mediocre things.
This is the house where the Browns used to live before finding themselves homeless. We have reached out to several neighbors to have them talk about the allegations of discrimination made against the Browns landlord. So far, they have declined our request for an interview.
We've seen people being told, like, you can't live, I can't sell my house because you're black, and we don't want black people in this neighborhood.
Numbers released by the National Low Income Housing Coalition show there's been an incline in fair housing complaints since 2013. In 2017, there was close to 29,000 housing discrimination complaints filed across the United States. The Browns were one of those families filing a complaint with the Arizona Fair Housing Center, a private organization that works to eliminate housing discrimination.
And the reason why this is happening to us is the reason why it probably happens to a lot of people in America is because of our race. This is a race issue, and you know, we've been discriminated against, and now we're homeless because of someone's decision that they made to use ethnocentrism, you know, against our family.
We have repeatedly tried to reach out to the Browns' ex-landlord for comment, but he has not answered any of our attempts. As for the Brown family, there has been no final resolution to the formal complaint they filed and are still struggling to find a new permanent home. In the broadcast center, Alexa Avila, Cronkite News.
Officials in Mexico say they have deported nearly 100 Central American migrants just one day after they attempted to storm the U.S.-Mexico border.
Hundreds of people were peacefully protesting near the U.S. border in Tijuana when a smaller group broke off and charged towards the border fence. Tensions quickly rose and Border Patrol agents fired tear gas into Mexico and shut down traffic in both directions at the San Ysidro port of entry. President Donald Trump used the situation to call on Congress to provide funding for the construction of the border wall.
The migrants are a part of a larger caravan that pushed toward the U.S. in hopes of seeking asylum. There is concern if a similar scene could develop at Arizona's southern border.
Cronkite News reporter Abdel Jimenez spoke with local immigration attorneys and advocacy groups to get different perspectives on the complicated issue.
There's still some confusion as to what exactly is needed to ask for and obtain asylum right now in the United States. We wanted to tackle that issue while also speaking with those who provide help to these migrants and those who do not want them coming into the United States. These images show the moment part of the migrant caravan at the San Ysidro-Tijuana border tried to rush the point of entry yesterday. A severe escalation of the situation that has immigration attorneys in the valley saying this is a flashpoint around the topic of asylum, especially when at the southern border.
To get asylum in the United States is actually very, very difficult. You have to prove that you have a realistic probability of returning to your country, and you're going to be exposed to a probable violence if you're there based on certain categories. So those are the first two things you got to prove, which is tough.
With the recent wave of the migrant caravan arriving at the border, pro-immigration groups working there are banding together, providing legal services to those confused with an often daunting process.
Lawyers all over the United States who are coming, not every week, but with some frequency to Nogales, and they're spending a week here and providing information to migrants and providing the legal support that they can within the limited time frame.
However, scenes like these are exactly the reason those who oppose increased immigration say tough immigration laws are necessary.
So basically the problem with our asylum laws right now is that once you get into the country, which is you literally just have to say that you have a credible fear of persecution, once you get past that step, it's very easy to just disappear into the interior of the country. So when we talk about fixing our asylum laws, it's really about making sure to close those loopholes.
But with thousands of desperate migrants already at the border and more expected to arrive, one Phoenix attorney says the situation probably won't get better until it gets worse.
I think as long as you have a very prosperous nation next to countries that have suffered long decades of suppression, of pain, of poverty, you will always have immigrants trying to get to this more prosperous land.
San Diego Customs and Border Patrol says 42 people, mostly men, have been arrested on suspicion of illegally trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border. Meanwhile, the Mexican Interior Ministry announced it would deport about 500 of those migrants, accusing them of violence. In the broadcast center, Abdel Jimenez, Cronkite News.
Newly elected Democratic Arizona Representative Raquel Terán has found herself in the headlines the past few days, but not because of her recent win. The representative-elect has been taken to court by a woman who claims Terán was not born in the United States and therefore is not qualified to serve in public office. Cronkite News reporter Alexa Avila was at the courthouse this morning.
This is not the first time Alice Novoa has taken Terán to court. Back in 2012, she made the same claim after Terán ran for state senate, with a judge later dismissing that case. Today, another judge has also ruled this latest lawsuit was baseless, but Novoa has vowed to fight on.
I'm happy that this is over. I can't deny that this was a burden.
A burden that landed Representative-elect Raquel Terán inside a Maricopa County courtroom today. A judge dismissing the lawsuit filed against Terán last week by this woman, Alice Novoa.
So I'm very excited.
Terán vowed to fight the suit after she was served just 2 days after winning her election for District 30 in Phoenix.
The message was clear that I was not going to be intimidated or harassed or allow this psychological warfare to go on. We know that in our communities, in a local level, at a national level, we're living an anti-immigrant climate.
Judge correctly and squarely rejected Ms. Novoa's claims that are born in her racial animus.
Despite the judge's ruling today, Novoa says she'll continue to try and prove her belief Terán wasn't born in the U.S.
Because millions of illegal aliens are registered to vote, and thousands of elected officials are illegal aliens and are holding office in every state. And I'm talking about anchor babies, and if she is an anchor baby, I plan to take her all the way to the Supreme Court once and for all.
Despite Novoa's claims, Terán's attorney explained the process the representative-elect who was born in Douglas has to go through to run for office.
So a legislative candidate is required to turn in nomination petitions on which people from their district say that they nominate that person to be a candidate for the office that they seek. At the same time they turn that in, they're also required to turn in what's called a nomination paper. And on that nomination paper, the candidate says under penalty of perjury that they are qualified to hold the office that they seek. And here, because this is a legislative office, that would include citizenship.
Despite the evidence in the court's decision, Novoa says she is not giving up.
This is not even a birth certificate.
This is a reminder that it not only can happen to me, but it can happen to a child in the classroom. It could happen to workers. It can happen to other elected officials that are knocking on doors, or other candidates that are knocking on doors.
More than 1,000 troops are currently being deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border to provide support to Border Patrol in anticipation of the arrival of the migrant caravan from Central America. Today, President Trump said that number could go as high as 15,000. Cronkite News reporter Holly Bernstein went to Nogales yesterday to speak with local residents and politicians about their reactions to the deployment.
The president made those comments to reporters today at the White House. He says the U.S. is going to be prepared and the migrants are not going to come into our country. Residents in the border town are concerned about the impact. I also spoke with the Nogales mayor, who says he has not been contacted with information about this deployment.
And it feels like we're in a militarized zone. We don't need any more.
The town of Nogales is bisected by the U.S.-Mexico border. Thousands of troops will soon be deployed along this area to assist Border Patrol with the migrant caravan coming from Central America. A physical divide has also created a divide of reactions to the troops within the Nogales community.
I would say very little to none impact. I mean, it's happened before and a lot of people notice it, but it doesn't really affect anything. They do what they do.
Nanette Miranda, who owns an art gallery there, says it makes travel and business harder.
Many people who live and work here have business and or family on both sides of the border. So to the extent that it impedes movement across the border, it's just not necessary.
Nogales Mayor John Doyle says the troops act as a deterrent, providing additional barriers and logistical support for the Border Patrol with a large amount of people arriving at the border.
That it's nothing personal, nothing about that we don't like, people from Central America or something. No, it's not about that.
Doyle also says he has not been contacted by military officials regarding the troops' presence.
It would be appropriate and they would show some respect for the community leaders to at least let us know what's going on.
Other residents, like shop worker Myra Alejandra Reyes-Gaxiola, are sympathetic to the migrants in the caravan.
I think it's very sad because people come from very far away so they can have an opportunity right here.
Airbnb has been a provider of living spaces for people looking for a place to rest their heads. Now, the company is opening its doors to refugees here in Phoenix. Reporter Cammie Clark explains Airbnb's Open Homes program.
This house looks no different than any other here in Phoenix. But this house is used to help house refugees through the Airbnb program Open Homes, which has several partners, including Hospitality Services Center and the International Rescue Committee.
When IRC called and said Airbnb was asking if we would be able to cooperate with them, we felt like that was a really good match.
The refugees stay in the home for about 1 to 2 weeks for free. It's just part of the services the IRC offers.
Here in Phoenix, we help resettle refugees from around the world. When they first arrive in Phoenix, we help them find housing, employment, healthcare, education.
As of September 2018, Airbnb has been able to house more than 15,000 people through Open Homes, according to their website. During the wintertime, it can be harder to house refugees here in Phoenix. Airbnb is making an effort to get more hosts.
Hearing from someone you trust about something like this is so impactful, and so we're trying to spread the word person by person, neighborhood by neighborhood, because we know there's a huge interest in Phoenix in helping.
Though there may be some uncertainty about who is coming into your home, the safety of Open Homes help refugees, many from the war-torn Congo, settle into new lives.
They're fleeing violence and they're looking for a safe place to land. So I think that's probably the biggest hurdle to get over, is in people's minds who the refugees are and is it safe to have them in my home.
Airbnb is looking to expand their Open Homes program to include other causes. In Glendale, Cammie Clark, Cronkite News.
Earlier this year, the University of Arizona received a special designation that allows it to getting an education easier for some Hispanic students. The only university in Arizona so far to receive this distinction. Cronkite News reporter Alexa Avila went to Tucson to find out the impact this recognition is having.
If they know the U of A is designated as a Hispanic serving institution, they might see the U of A as a place for them.
Just like it's been for Bryant Valencia. He's been a student at the University of Arizona for 8 years and says the university being recently designated as a Hispanic serving institution is a testament to its commitment of serving minority communities in the state.
The U of A is dedicating more of its resources, but also in being intentional about impacting access for Latinx, the Latinx student community.
This designation given by the Department of Education will boost grants and increase opportunities for federal funding supporting financial aid. Marla Franco, Executive Director for Student Affairs at U of A, says this designation highlights the university's work in terms of diversity and inclusion.
So one of the things that we are certainly connecting the campus community in conversations and generating ideas about is how do we serve these students well?
To earn this distinction, U of A had to show 25% of students identified as Hispanic, while also enrolling a certain number of low-income students at cost per pupil. Elizabeth Soltero, who directs the Casa Olin and Chavez centers on campus, says being designated as a Hispanic-serving institution is a point of pride for the school.
We definitely see this as an opportunity to expand our reach, and Casa Olin is a new living learning theme community on campus for Latinx identifying students, which is something new this fall, and it's the first one that the U of A has brought on to our campus. So we are a partner with housing, and so we see that expanding and growing as we go forward.
In Tucson, Alexa Avila, Cronkite News.
The University of Arizona is one of 105 four-year public institutions in the U.S. with the designation. The university must submit a new application to the U.S. Department of Education each year to maintain it.
As Arizona continues to face a shortage of doctors in rural areas, some medical experts say hardline immigration policies could deter young physicians born outside of the United States to fill up these roles.
I traveled to Xolo, a medically underserved area which is federally recognized as having few primary care providers. The impact foreign-born doctors are making in this Arizona mountain community is already huge. Osab Ahmed has been a primary care physician in Arizona for over a decade, and he's seen firsthand the need for doctors in areas where it can be hard to get one.
The rural health is so important. These people cannot commute 3.5 hours in Phoenix just for a minor problem.
It's doctors like Ahmed, born in Pakistan and living in the U.S. since 1995, who play a critical role in underserved areas like Xolo, where he works at Summit Internal Medicine. According to a recent study by the University of Portland, just over 23% of doctors in Arizona are foreign-born, yet the state continues to face a doctor shortage. Arizona ranks 42nd in the country for active number of primary care physicians per 100,000 residents.
Roughly 30,000 first-year positions, residency positions across the United States. About 7,000 of those go to international medical graduates, with about 3,000 being U.S. citizens and about 4,000 being foreign-born.
Many rural clinics, like Summit Internal Medicine, rely on medical students to care for patients. That's why when there's a doctor shortage, these places get hit the hardest. Ahmed can see anywhere from 10 to 20 patients a day, and a majority of them are older residents who go in for checkups. Earl Richmond has gone through 3 doctors since moving to the area.
And when I find a good doctor like the one I have here, he's great. And what he does is he'll figure out or try and find the problem that you have.
But finding a trusted doctor isn't just an issue for the older generation, it also impacts those who need specialty doctors, like Sean Recob, who is transgender.
The smaller towns, typically you have more closed-minded communities sometimes. But to begin with that, obviously less doctors means there's less people who would handle such.
Despite the need, sometimes the immigration process is not easy for international doctors hoping to practice medicine in the U.S. Often, it can be discouraging.
There are so many steps which need to fall into the right place before you get here.
Once it does happen, the work these doctors do in rural areas is one they and their patients don't take for granted.
He's helped me a lot, more than a lot of the ones before.
I'm proud from where I am, but I think I'm prouder where I am today.
Since 2015, 3 hospitals in rural areas have closed in Arizona. The Robert Graham Center has predicted that Arizona would need a 50% increase in the state's current number of primary care physicians in order to keep up with demand. In the broadcast center, Abdel Jimenez, Cronkite News.
For decades, a piece of land on Phoenix's south side has hid the secrets of hundreds of early Latino settlers who helped build the city, many of them buried in a place that seems long forgotten. Cronkite News reporter Brittany Watson talked with activists and community members who are speaking out and hoping this piece of the city's history gets the recognition it deserves.
Vandalized, trashed, abandoned, this unmarked field is the final resting place for over 300 Mexican pioneers who spent their lives helping build Phoenix in its early days. This nondescript patch of land located off 12th Street and Broadway is actually the Sotelo Herd Cemetery, with its earliest recorded burial dating back to the late 1800s.
Phoenix wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for those people who were the foundation of the city of Phoenix, and somehow we forget that.
Many residents who live near Sotelo Herd don't even know their homes are just yards away from a cemetery, a place where many children were also buried. Some of those who do know say they've seen this final resting place get trashed.
I'd often see people riding their motorbikes and running across the field, throwing rocks and messing around. I don't think they had an idea of it being a cemetery.
The Pioneer Cemetery Association has worked to preserve historic cemeteries like Sotelo Herd by salvaging and removing what they can of the damaged headstones to try and preserve what little is left. Litchfield Park resident Ellie Roman has spent years researching her ancestors, eventually finding out that 8 of them were buried at Sotelo Herd, a cemetery that she had never even heard of before.
I was really surprised we had so many family members there, but it made sense. They were ranchers, laborers. They worked the Herd ranch. My different branches of the family, they've all been here, it seems like, from the early 1900s.
But a lot has changed since that time.
Currently, the cemetery is enclosed on 2 sides, leaving the other 2 sides exposed. Representatives from the nonprofit organization that own this land say that they do not have the money to finish all the improvements that are still needed.
The nonprofit organization Trellis owns the land where the cemetery sits. They were supposed to build low-income housing on part of the property, but that clearly hasn't happened.
Unfortunately, the market crashed, and to this day, we haven't built anything. But we have just maintained the land.
The Pioneer Cemetery Association and Trellis have proposed improvements, including building an iron fence along the south and west perimeters, having a monument, and adding an entrance to the cemetery on 12th Street. The repairs will cost thousands of dollars. The main question now is, where will that money come from?
We need everyone's help to raise the funding to finish this beautification project for Sotelo Herd Cemetery.
To know that their babies or family members are there, not to have that respect is just heartbreaking.
In Phoenix, Brittany Watson, Cronkite News.
Representatives from both Trellis and the Pioneer Cemetery Association say they have plans to speak with the Phoenix City Council about taking ownership of the land and maintaining the cemetery. There's still no set date on when that meeting will take place. A few weeks back, the ASU women's basketball team went on a journey to Window Rock. Our Anthony Totri followed the team throughout their trip to capture just what the Sun Devils event meant.
We have not played our best basketball yet. Have we? No. We've missed shots we normally make. We've taken too many possessions off. Let's go. Yeah? Let's go. Rebound! And then Diego. 1, 2, 3. Rebound!
Diego translates to go for it. All weekend, the Sun Devils went for it,
but the team's Diego would extend far beyond a game they would end up losing to Baylor 65-59. It's Friday, 2 days before a nationally televised showdown on the Navajo reservation with the number 4 team in the country. The team boards buses for a 5-hour trek to Window Rock, the Navajo Nation capital. The Sun Devils stay at a hotel just 10 minutes from a local high school that will host its first Division I college basketball game in its gleaming 6,500-seat gymnasium.
This community is coming to root for us, and so let's do this for them.
After Friday's late-night arrival, ASU receives a warm welcome at their shoot-around Saturday. But it's when the team steps off the court that they draw an outpouring of appreciation from the fans.
Forks out, where's your forks? Come on. There you go.
Lines wrap around the hallways for an autograph session that lasts for an hour, only ending when the final person makes their way to the front.
Just hearing the stories that we've heard today and weeks before this, it's just like really puts like a perspective, you know, a different kind of outlook on things, and just, you know, learning about their history, I'm like, wow.
Put your hand down.
After time with the fans, the Sun Devils take an exploration around Window Rock, including the famous rock itself, and make a visit to a Veterans Memorial ahead of Sunday's Veterans Day game. Throughout their trip, the Sun Devils encounter a community where basketball is everything.
The opportunities are there, and hopefully with just the intensity and the passion of the game, you know, they get a sense for, okay, if I work really hard, you know, I can have anything I want, or I can get what I want.
Sunday, the day of the game. But for the Sun Devils, their aspirations to inspire would not so much be determined by the team's loss to Baylor, but rather the heart on display.
Just the character that we play with, who we are, I thought that shined through today, and I just said that's going to inspire the 80,000 kids on the reservation, you know, even more than if we win.
But the Sun Devils weren't the only ones inspiring. While ASU brought with it lessons of boundless opportunity, the Sun Devils left with a lesson of their own: to go for it, or as they say on the res, Diego. In Window Rock, Anthony Totri, Cronkite News.